Gavilar, in a vision, talks to the Stormfather while circling the ring of honor blades driven into the ground, a scent of burnt flesh in the air. Gavilar continues his charade of righteousness with the Stormfather in an attempt to become a herald and ascend mortality. Gavilar guesses at the words necessary, and the Stormfather chastises him, saying how he will not guess the words at random, but reveals that the words are in the Way of Kings, of which Gavilar has memorized in his pursuit of power, having taught himself to read as not to reveal his schemes to the women in his life. Those elusive words are the most important Gavilar will ever say, allowing him to become the Stormfather's champion, accepting him into the Oath Pact, and replacing, he suspected, Town, who had not left his blade with the others. Gavilar returns Chana's blade into the ground and requests the Stormfather end the vision. Gavilar, returning to the physical realm inside his wife Navani's study, continues trying to guess at the words and fails. Gavilar thinks on if the Stormfather knew what really lay within his heart, they would not be working together. The Stormfather reminds Gavilar that he only agreed for him to be his champion, not necessarily a herald, and warns how the heralds have all slipped to insanity with the passing of time. Gavilar is unbothered by this, confident he will find a solution later. A knock sounds on the door. Gavilar, expecting Rastaris, is instead greeted by Dalinar bursting in, speaking of how he feels a kinship to the Parshendi and wants to know Gavilar's intentions with them. Gavilar, not having time for this, more focused on balancing all the threats around him, uses Dalinar's guilt against him and brings up his wife Evie. This does the trick, and Dalinar leaves, unaware that his brother knows how Dalinar had inadvertently killed Evie. Gavilar sends a fellow Son of Honor after Dalinar, ensuring his brother finds some wine, despite having just told Dalinar to follow the codes tonight. After Dalinar leaves, the Stormfather interjects that Dalinar has potential and could be more than Gavilar believes. Gavilar is still haunted by a distant memory of Dalinar, eyes seemingly red, hungering for Gavilar's life. The next knock at the door reveals Thydakar appearing behind Gavilar, a shimmering white-blue figure made of light with a spike protruding through one eye. Thydakar insists Gavilar deliver Rastaris to him, accusing Gavilar of playing games. Gavilar continues playing games, while the image of Thydakar transforms into the natural form of the Seon, which Gavilar mistakes for light weaving. Before departing, Thydakar leaves Gavilar with a warning.
I know you're meeting Rastaris today. Prepare him, then deliver him to my agents for questioning. Or else. That is my ultimatum, Gavilar. You would not like to be my enemy.
Gavilar is left with a sense of fear from the encounter, and in his panic touches some of the schematics of Navani's, which reminds him of the coldness between them, which he thinks on rectifying until he remembers the Stormfather's words.
Everyone you know will be dust by the time you return.
The thought reaffirms Gavilar's conviction, and Rastaris arrives next, accompanied by a tall Makabaki man with a birthmark on his cheek. The stranger holds Gavilar's gaze, an opposite when compared to the skittish Rastaris. Gavilar had considered tossing Rastaris aside and taking control of the Sons of Honor, not believing him to be a herald. The thought was laughable, for the Stormfather had told Gavilar himself that the heralds had all died and returned to Braze. Rastaris makes an announcement, wishing to put a stop to trying to restore the powers. This cowardice annoys Gavilar, and he brings up Thydakar, saying how he has protected Rastaris from him so far, but now questions what Thydakar wants with him. Rastaris explains that Thydakar can't abide another man with secrets, and that he wishes to know the location of the unmade Ba-Ido Mishram, referring to her as the Granter of Forms. Gavilar plays his hand, revealing his Voidlight spheres, telling Rastaris that it is set in motion, and that the project was a success. Rastaris refers to his companion as Nail, another supposed herald, and displays hope in saying how they could bring them back and then use the Voidlight to destroy them. Gavilar also reveals he has found a way to move Voidlight, and presumably Stormlight, all the way to Braze. Rastaris is very interested in this and wants to find a way to escape. Gavilar notes to himself how Thydakar had also been very interested in this, while Nail is more doubtful on how well this moving of light performs over long distances. Gavilar catches Navani spying at the door, and she enters the room playing it off while the others depart, with Rastaris warning of another herald being here tonight, hinting at Shalash. Gavilar is annoyed at Navani, but also notices how nice she looks tonight, which makes him almost reconsider his need to sever the bond between them. Sometime later, after dealing with Navani, Gavilar returns to his personal chambers, contemplates, and discusses with the Stormfather. Gavilar thinks on how Navani's work with the Fabrials had led him to find a way to ferry Voidspren from Shadesmar via gemstones and aluminum boxes. Gavilar curses Axendueth, realizing that this next part may have to be done without her, relying solely on his scholar Vasher, who Gavilar indicates created the Voidlight. Gavilar attempts to demand the Stormfather make him a herald, to no avail. Amaram, Taravangian, and another man and 2 women enter the chambers for their scheduled meeting. After going through the motions of giving a speech, Gavilar informs Amaram that they now have a weapon to destroy the Voidbringers once they restore the Desolations, or, as Amaram suggests, a means to control them. Gavilar then speaks with Taravangian, at first underestimating him because of the size of his kingdom. However, he is left unnerved by the man after Gavilar speaks of a death rattle that Taravangian himself has heard firsthand from his dying mother 10 years prior.
I stand before him, above the world itself, and he speaks the truth. The desolation is near, the Everstorm, the night of sorrows.
The Stormfather thankfully interrupts, announcing Eshonai is at his door. Gavilar ushers everyone away and successfully manipulates the Parshendi woman, and by proxy her people, for the role they will play. After the signing of the treaty, Gavilar returns to his rooms to relax and tells the Stormfather that he will be mounting an expedition back to the Shattered Plains and will leverage the treaty to have the Parshendi lead him inward, toward Urithiru. Gavilar notices the Stormfather seems off, even for a Spren, and once questioned, the Stormfather confesses Gavilar is perhaps not the champion he had been sent to find by honor. Especially after Gavilar admits that once he becomes a herald, he will simply give in order to return from Braze and rule the world as an immortal fighting off the Voidbringers, claiming how his men will need the battle as training for recovering the Tranquiline Halls. Gavilar, realizing he has upset the Stormfather, asks how he may serve. The Stormfather once again tells Gavilar those are not the words, and this sends Gavilar into a tirade in which he shatters his orange wine glass, cursing the inadequate wine and the blasted codes he has been following. The Stormfather suddenly ripples, changing into a vast storm-like form with depth-defying eyes, and announces a herald has died, which leads Gavilar to realize the Stormfather had lied, and confirms for Gavilar that Rastaris is a herald, Kalek. The Stormfather points out that Gavilar knows very little and assumes too much. Gavilar asks what the Stormfather is, to which he replies, "The biggest fool of them all. Goodbye, Gavilar. I have seen a glimpse of what is coming. I will not prevent it." Sadeas bursts into the room, announcing an assassin, and suggests Gavilar give him his robes to act as a decoy while Gavilar suits up in Sadeas' own personal shard plate. Gavilar is surprised at the gesture. As he suits up, Gavilar wonders what else that Spren may have lied about. A short time later, Gavilar falls surrounded by his collapsing balcony. He looks up at the assassin in white, noticing he carries Yezrian's honor blade, and sees the Stormfather as a halo around the assassin's head. Gavilar converses with it, and Szeth mistakes him as talking to him. Szeth tells Gavilar the Parshendi sent him, while the Stormfather assures Gavilar he did not have a hand in his demise. Gavilar, realizing that his plans are falling to ruin, and that he had invited the enemy here to destroy his legacy, thinks of a way to rectify things. His son, Elhokar, comes to mind, but Gavilar thinks of how worthless the boy is, and so moves on to the logical choice of his brother, Dalinar, the Blackthorn, the very man Gavilar has been trying to suppress. It all comes down to Dalinar. Gavilar attempts to give the Voidlight Sphere to the Stormfather, and to tell his brother he must find the most important words a man can say. The Stormfather denies this request, saying how he will never trust Gavilar's family again, leaving Gavilar to his fate.
Gavilar gave a whine of pain, not from his body but from his soul. He had failed. He had brought them all to ruin. That, he realized with horror, would be his legacy. In the end, Dalinar Kholin, heir to the Heralds, died, as all men, ultimately, must, alone.
Kaladin feels good, not great, as he stands atop Urithiru inside his room thinking of not only Tef's funeral the day before, but how Dalinar had struck a deal. The entire fate of Roshar would be determined in 10 days' time. Well, 9 now, between the Champion of Honor and the Champion of Odium. Kaladin had accepted his place, having stepped down as leader of the Windrunners, and needed time for his soul to heal, meaning he would not be participating in the final battle. While getting dressed, Kaladin takes note of how Urithiru is awakened now with its own bondsmith, and the result is an amplification of his Stormlight abilities. Syl appears in front of him, human-sized, in a hava opposed to her normal girlish dress. She notes his good mood and inadvertently reminds him of the Contest of Champions, and how if Dalinar loses, he would lose not only Roshar, but would be forced to become a fused and help Odium conquer the Cosmere. Syl succeeds at cheering Kaladin out of his momentary stupor, having started to spiral. Kaladin goes back to the window and feels the breeze, his armor windsprin swirling nearby. Kaladin begins to hear a voice on the wind and notices Syl, eyes closed, in an almost trance, bouncing to an unheard rhythm. The voice whispers,
Kaladin, I need your help. I'm so sorry to ask more of you. A storm is coming, Kaladin. The worst storm. I'm sorry.
Syl awakens and Kaladin confesses what he heard, asking if the wind is alive. Syl confirms, saying everything is alive, and Kaladin notices the wind is no longer calm, but instead waiting for something. Shallan stands atop Lasting Integrity in Shadesmar with her 2 cryptics, and Shallan begins to think on how she had bonded the 2. The original, Testament, leaned with her back against the stone, the damage to her geometric pattern obvious to Shallan, caused by Shallan herself rejecting the bond after using her shard blade to kill her mother as a child. Shallan holds the Deadeye's hand, and Pattern, her living cryptic, which he reminds her he is very happy about, explains to her that some connection remains between her and Testament, for the breaking of the bond was done by a child without full intent. Shallan hugs Testament and promises to find a way to heal her, thinking on how Kalek, the herald she was sent here to kill, may have answers.
The cryptic slowly, but deliberately, put her arms around Shallan and squeezed back. Rest now, Shallan said, wiping her eyes and standing. I'm going to figure this out.
Kaladin floats down to the family quarters, using his seemingly infinite supply of tower light, which feels more calming than Stormlight, which tended to drive him to action. Here he finds his little brother, Oridon, playing with blocks, and his mother, Hesina, gives Kaladin some food and tells Syl stories of when Kaladin was young like Oridon. Kaladin at first feels this moment of reprieve is wrong, but knows Teft would feel differently, so Kaladin chooses to enjoy it. That strange voice on the wind continues whispering to him. Kaladin notices that Syl had decided to give herself a glove to cover her safe hand, which she had never bothered doing before. Syl's interest in Kaladin's childhood stories sparks Hesina to ask if Kaladin had ever asked Syl about Dungspren, a concept he was very intrigued by as a child. Syl reminds Kaladin that he's basically asking a princess about dung, and soon Oridon joins in on the conversation, and Syl finds this whole ordeal hilarious.
Dungspren, she said flatly. You're asking the sole living daughter of storms, basically a princess by human terminology, this question. How much poop do I know?
Kaladin is saved by the arrival of his father, Lirin, bringing in Dalinar's current medical operating procedures, which are in disarray from the heavy casualties. Kaladin asks after the war, and Lirin says Dalinar expects a heavy surge from the enemy to try and capture more land before the contest in order to keep more, depending on the outcome. Kaladin questions Syl on her odd behavior, and Syl says how she likes being treated more as a person as she was in Shadesmar. That being said though, she insists on only wanting to be treated that way some of the time, because she also quite enjoys being worshipped, which causes Kaladin to think of Rock, hoping they would see him again one day. The wind pleads Kaladin to come to her and listen to the bondsmith. Dalinar had already requested Kaladin accompany an expedition to Shinovar with some strange company, in an attempt to help the mad Ishi. Hesina is amused at Kaladin's familiarity with the Heralds of Legend. Liren awkwardly gives Kaladin an affectionate goodbye, and Syl, changing her outfit to that of a Bridge 4 uniform and a ponytail, making her look older, accompanies Kaladin on his way out to seek Dalinar.
It was time to go. With a final hug for his brother, Kaladin strode out to meet his destiny, feeling like he was in control for the first time in years, deciding to take the next step, rather than being thrust into it by momentum or crisis. And while he'd woken up feeling good, that knowledge, that sense of volition felt great.